Hey, it's Jack from Jack Gately Real Estate and the Online Real Estate Academy. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I know you've missed me. Earlier this week, I was making another video. I was cheating on you. And later today, I'll tell you what in this video, I'll tell you what that video, I put it on another YouTube channel. Yes. Yeah, I know. I thought I was going to be with you on Tuesday, but no, I was doing this video. I'll fill you in later. I know you missed me. You're only human. Of course you missed me. In the meantime, let's bring up the hot news from Inman. Defendants and plaintiffs in MLS-PIN no-select case unite against the Department of Justice. You're like, what? What happened here? All right, so let me just kind of read through the tea leaves here on this headline. And this is what I'm thinking it is. The lawyers for the plaintiffs, they had this nice little paycheck coming their way by suing MLS-PIN. And they got a $3 million settlement. And the judge was like, yeah, this sounds good. And you're going to make this small little rule change. Okay, that sounds like a deal. And then came the Department of Justice. And if you're the MLS-PIN, the defendant in the case, you're basically, want to get this over and done with. And $3 million, a rule change that was going to happen anyways, that might not actually have any real impact in the marketplace. This sounds like a nice, safe way to settle the case. And then the lawyers that are bringing the case, they're like, yeah, let's cash in here, right? It's not the biggest settlement, but $3 million. Yeah, we're going to make some change, right? And all the plaintiffs will get a check in the mail, like this check I got when some lawyer sued my mortgage company. I won a class action case, and this check is worth $3.31, which I probably should cash. It's good until April 7th. Otherwise, the lawyer is going to get the $3.31, right? If I don't cash this, then some lawyer gets to keep my $3.31. So I think that the lawyers were like, yeah, we're going to make a couple of bucks. And MLS-PIN was going to be like, we're going to get this behind us. And then the DOJ comes in and says, no, there's a much larger issue at stake. And we have something to say about it, which was the big video that dropped February 15th, the big letter of interest that dropped. And the Department of Justice, the federal government, want to slow down this whole settlement. And neither the plaintiffs or the defendants in this MLS case here in Massachusetts, MLS-PIN, are very happy about that. Also lurking in the background, and thank you for joining us this morning. Happy to have you. Love your comments if you want to throw in something. Lurking in the background is this other thing, which we've mentioned a couple of times, and that is the multi-district, what the hell do they call it? It has some, where is it here? It's the United States Judicial Panel on Multi-District Litigation. And I think what the plaintiffs and the defendants don't want to happen is they don't want the no-select MLS-PIN case to be drawn into that, because that's just gonna string out the potential cash in that the lawyers could make, right? The lawyers don't want to be drawn into some litigation panel from, they don't want to do that. They just want to make their money. And the defendants just want to settle this thing, is get it over with. Put it in. I want to put this whole thing in my rear view, right, Ben Affleck? And yeah, that's, I think, what's happening here. And so both the defendants and the plaintiffs have tried to pump the brakes on the Department of Justice intervention in the MLS-PIN case. That is a really interesting development. We'll have to see how Judge Patty Saris in Boston handles that. That case, if there's a next big hearing where everyone's there, because I haven't seen that. I have attended virtually, but maybe next time, if there's a big hearing, you will have my word. I will try to get there in person if there's a big, confab at the federal courthouse in downtown Boston. So as part of this whole thing. There has been this push for more buyer agency representation agreements. You probably heard about this. In fact, in the exclusive video that I released and was covered by Inman, thank you very much, Andrea B., Kevin Sears, the new president of NAR, who I don't know, even though he's from Massachusetts, revealed that he had used a buyer representation agreement for the very first time in a deal that he closed earlier this year. And so the whole industry is like, well, if we're going to be moving to bifurcated commissions or decoupled commissions or whatever you want to call it, where the seller pays the seller agent and the buyer pays the buyer, then we probably want to have buyer agency agreements. So that's been, kind of conventional wisdom for the last year or something like that. Well, the Consumer Federation of America is now analyzed 43 of these such agreements and concluded that they generally serve to protect, wait for it, agents and agencies, but offered few benefits to the buyers. So you remember when I was down in Florida and did that live stream from my cousin's backyard where I actually put the camera and propped it up into the palm tree. That's how I held it still. And remember, I was so excited about so many different business opportunities. And I'm going to throw out another business idea that I had. And it's just like a crazy idea, but you kind of come up with 1,000 in order to find the real gems. So in this case here, the Consumer Federation of America is saying that all of these buyer agency agreements, they've got some problems with these buyer agency agreements. And so I'm just going to, or even the seller agent agreement. And we know they all have problems with the seller agent agreement. So here's an idea. On a nationwide basis, come up with a set of forms that are all written that are pro-seller and or pro-buyer. So just imagine, if you will, going into this Twilight Zone listing appointment. So Agent Amy goes to a listing appointment, and she's having a great time seeing the house. And then Agent Amy says, can we sit here at the kitchen table? And Agent Amy then brings out her listing agreement and is going to ask the sellers to sign it. And the sellers say to Agent Amy, we really want you to list our house. I think you'll do a great job. But we don't want you to use the listing agreement from your agency. We actually have our own listing agreement where the seller is telling Agent Amy, if you want our listing, you're going to use our agreement written from the seller's perspective. Now, I'm not saying that that's like a viable business opportunity, but you've got to start thinking like this. Like, there's a lot of opportunities out here. When the cookie crumbles, there'll be a lot of pieces to pick up, right? And some of those are going to be pure, absolute nuggets of gold. So, yeah, and it's coming, right? So it's going to start to think creatively. Remember what I said in Florida, a smaller piece of a much larger pie. There are a lot of business opportunities. And what is Agent Amy going to say? Oh, I only want your listing if we can use our contract. And the agent's going to get kicked out the door, right? Yeah, that's not going to happen. So let's talk about Redfin. So Redfin is suffering because we're in a transaction depression, or actually recession, whatever you want to call it. Redfin cut losses, touts traffic to website. So I don't understand how Glenn Gelman still has a job, but he's always so happy in this picture. He is saying that we lost. Let's scroll down to how much they lost this year. The company ended 2023 with a loss of $130 million, but that's a significant improvement over the prior year where they lost $321 million. So, hey, we only lost half of what we lost the year before. We're doing much better. We're doing so much better. And basically he's saying, even though we lost $130 million, we have a lot of people coming to our website. Yeah, we have a lot of people coming to we're going to be just fine. We got a lot of people coming to our website. We lost $130 million. And he does not want to be in a ad war. To be honest, I spent most of the Super Bowl upstairs in the bathroom or making nachos because I didn't want to see the competitors' ads. But according to early reports from SimilarWeb and other sites that compare traffic, we got more Super Bowl traffic Sunday than people spending zillions of dollars. He doesn't want to compete in an ad war because he can't compete in an ad. When you're losing $130 million a year, you probably can't compete in an ad war. And yeah, I don't know what the efficacy of buying Super Bowl ads is, whether that's a good investment or not. I guess some people obviously think it is. But Redfin is a discount brokerage, and they're still hanging on. But how many cycles have we seen where I remember back in 2006, 2007, there were a lot of discount brokerages, and they all got demolished when the great financial crisis came along, right? Couldn't handle that. So those business models, especially I think here in Massachusetts, we are innovation resistant here in Massachusetts. Part of that has to do with the type of real estate we have. We don't have the massive tract housing that you would see in like the newer states, Utah, or Arizona, Florida. Lots of properties here are one of a kind, even in my neighborhood in a way, where cookie cutter houses are more common elsewhere. At least, I just think that's part of the Massachusetts thing, where we're not really, we say we're big in innovation when it comes to technology, but not in terms of real estate business models. Gary Keller from Keller Williams. Right now, real estate is in a recession. Now, it's not a price recession. As you know, it's not a price recession in most places. It's a transaction recession. Didn't I really recently see that transactions bumped up a little bit, I think, to 4 million on a seasonally adjusted average. So that's good off the bottom of 3.8, but we are most certainly in a transaction recession. And I don't really know when. I don't think it's going to be like, this spring, snap a finger and things are going to go back to normal. I agree with Mr. Zuber over at One Rental at a Time that it could be years before we actually get back to the type of transactions level that we're used to. And by the time that happens, we might be looking at a different commission system, right? Compass continues to add agents. They actually picked up 1,000 agents in 2023 and cut losses for the year by nearly in half. So another story where they didn't lose as much as they did the year before. A net loss of $84 million, a significant improvement compared to over a year ago when they lost $158 million. So, all right, good job, Compass. You only lost $84 million. And Redfin lost, what do they lose? They lost $130 million or something like that. What a disaster. If I'm thinking I'm working at Redfin or Compass, what do you think is going to happen to you at some point? Bueller, what's going to happen to you at some point? At some point, they're going to start to look at you, and I think they actually already have. They're going to start to look at you as a profit center where your compensation plan will be tweaked without your consent. They'll just tell you, and your split and all of your fees, your split will go down and your fees will go up, right? That's just the next thing to happen at like places like Redfin. No doubt about it. Also, bad week for Redfin. They got sued again. So Redford and Cross here says new lawsuit targets buyer broker commissions. California resident is suing on behalf of home sellers who paid buyer agent in the 4 years before Redfin announced it was leaving NAR. Well, I'm really happy that I left NAR more than 4 years ago. So I'm really happy about this. When I look back at my career, I think that my departure from NAR is going to be one of the smartest things that I ever did as a real estate broker. I definitely think that looking back now, 4+ years, I think that's definitive case. I just want to say one thing about why you should be in favor of the future. One of my favorite commentators is on a TV network that I don't watch anymore because they fired their top person last year. You might know who I'm talking about. But one of the smartest persons on that network is a woman named Dana Perino. And she said one of the smartest things I've ever heard before is that you always want to be in favor of what's coming next. If it's absolutely positively coming next, you want to be in favor of it. Now, from my perspective, I want to be in favor of breaking the monopolies in real estate because I hate monopolies, and I believe that when you have a level playing field, it's better for the consumer, it's better for everybody, it's better for tiny little brokers like me rather than the big agencies, right? I think there's a lot of crumbs that tiny little brokers like me will be able to feast upon rather than the big agencies have tied everything up. So I think it's going to be a good for me for business. I think it's going to be good for buyers and sellers. So I'm in favor of it from a structural point of view. But maybe you're against all of that. Maybe you think it's a bad idea on principle. I think on principle it's a good idea. But maybe you think it's a bad idea on principle. But then you got to kind of shift to being pragmatic. And when you look at this pragmatically, you've got to, right? You don't need to know which way the wind blows, right? By a Bob Dylan song. You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. This is happening. So to use Dana Perino's point of view, you want to be in favor of what is next. You want to be in favor of what is next, right? Because this is happening and not going to be tomorrow. Although some things are going to start to change, especially these optional commissions, right? You don't have to, that seems to have gone away, although it might not actually have any impact in the marketplace. But something is changing, right? Right. I'm trying to remember all of my Joan Baez songs from the 60s, right? It's a hard wind that's kind of all of those things, right? It's changing. So you can try to be Sisyphus and roll that rock up the hill, but it's changing. So get on board or keep fighting. You do whatever you think is best, right? It's up to you. All right, up next, I want to just show you this chart from Lance Lambert. He is obviously from my favorite new website, Resi Club. I should be sponsored by Resi Club at this point. Lance Lambert, 40-year, these 40 housing markets have seen the biggest inventory spike over the past year. Southwest Florida is cooling fast. That's why inventory data tells us. My latest at Resi Club. So what is at the top of the list? Punta Gorda, Cape Coral, and Northport, Sarasota, Bradenton. You might remember that I was just there in that basically area. I wanted to do a YouTube collaboration with a real estate YouTuber down there, but it didn't work, and I was too busy having a lot of fun at the Daytona 500 and going out on a boat and sitting on the beach. But I couldn't help but notice in Englewood, which is where I stayed, the massive amount of houses that I saw that were in mid-construction but not being worked on. It was a perfect sunny day. It's like, 65, 70 degrees. And I'm driving around these neighborhoods just kind of checking it out. And I'm like, this house is halfway built. Where is the crew? This house is halfway built. Where's the crew? And then when you look at them, you actually look. There's a porta potty and a dumpster, and I imagine that must be some type of code regulation. And then I'm looking, is there any materials on site? There's no materials on site. The grass is grown. And I did, of course, visit or drive by some construction sites that were active. But the percentage of sites that I would say for every 5 stalled construction sites that I saw maybe 1 active construction site. And a lot of for sale signs all over this place. And we drove up to Sarasota, we drove Cape Coral, that whole area, Southwest Florida, there for 8 days. I don't know why the prices haven't changed, but I was just talking to someone yesterday about this. The prices have not changed commensurate with the volume of properties that are on the market. But I guess we have seen, according to Redfin, Florida's condo prices are falling as the cost of insurance and homeowners fees skyrocket. So that could be definitely the case. The part of Florida that I was at was hit hard by the hurricane. You might remember the hurricane. And condo prices fall in Florida, Jacksonville, Miami. So insurance is a huge topic over there. There's also a new law in Florida that if you have over 25 employees, you have to actually go through the E-Verify system and actually prove that they're legal to work in the United States. That sounds like a good law to me, but it also seems to have maybe dampened the supply of labor or their willingness to pay the actual rate needed. It's a very complex economic system. Just don't think there's enough buyers here. I think if there were tons of buyers for those homes, they would pay higher wages and there would be plenty of people on those work sites. You tell me. By the way, I'd love your comments if you want to throw in a comment. So I want to just tell you where I was yesterday or Monday and Tuesday. I was up in Maine, and there's this huge story in Maine of organized crime buying houses in Maine and using them as pot grow sites. And it will just, this is like a 20-second clip. This is the video I made earlier this week.
Number of external wiring and piping that's been added. Almost all of these properties include upgraded electrical service. This is the type of electrical service that you would typically see at a commercial building. Also, all of the windows are all blacked out so that you don't disturb the growth cycle of the marijuana plant. This property is also directly across from the local gas station, basically right under everyone's nose.
All right, so I went up and I saw about a half a dozen of these houses where organized crime is buying these houses and I mean not just a handful, hundreds of houses north and northwest of Augusta to use them as grow houses because you can buy them for like $70,000, $140,000. And a lot of them have giant garages or giant barns. They turn them into marijuana grow houses, grow the marijuana, and then it's on Interstate 95, and they bring it down to Massachusetts and New York. Just an amazing story. And yeah, so that's where I was. And I'll put a link in the description. That's why I didn't post a video on this channel, because I was cheating on you up in Maine. Earlier this week. Let's take a look at the 10-year. Oh no, 4.311. Yeah, not looking good. Yesterday's mortgage came in at 30-year fixed at Mortgage News Daily, 7.15. We are on the how do I want to say this? We are on the edge, 4 or 5 minutes away from some very important economic data. We have also housing data coming out at 10, but we have very important economic data coming out, initial jobless claims and personal consumption expenditures coming out at 8:30. We might go live for that. So when you look at the possible rate cut situation for March, according to the CME Fed Watch tool, we're looking at basically no chance for a Fed hike, a cut in March. None at all. Okay. May, maybe a slight chance, 20%, 1 out of 5 chance. I remember when this chart was almost exactly the opposite. It wasn't that long ago. And even in June, the market starts to change, but it's not like a super convincing market. And then again, as I've said, look at these dates on this on this chart. July 31st, September 18th, and then there's not another meeting until after the election. So I don't know how you're going to fit 6 rate cuts in here. I don't think so. I don't think if May 1st, they're saying not a good chance, that only leaves June, 1, 2, 3, 4. That only leaves 5 more meetings to fit 6 rate. There's not going to be 6 rate cuts this year, as if you haven't figured that out already. But I don't even know if there's going to be 3, right? Because once we start to get hot and heavy into this election year, which is we're right about there. How is the Fed going to maintain any type of political independence, or at least the appearance of political independence, by moving interest rates in any direction in September? Right? It's September 18th. They're gonna cut interest rates. And do you think so? I don't think they're gonna get away with that from a political point of view. I think that would be a really, really bad look. Okay, some other important news. Freddie Mac reports surge in multifamily serious delinquencies. Nope, nothing to see here. No, that's not important. GDP growth revised down to 3.2% on an annual rate. No, nothing to see here. Move along. Mortgage applications decreased in weekly survey. Activity stalled. Yeah, nope, nothing to see there. Move along. Yeah, I mean, it's not good. Notable headlines. Fed. So we had some Fed speak, and I thought this was very important. Said there are still some ways to go before hitting the 2% inflation target. Oh, you think so? And sees a likely uneven path back to 2% inflation. This is one of the Fed governors. While he said that let incoming economic data determine the monetary policy path, the debate over rate cuts is a sign of progress on lowering inflation. And the Fed is likely to cut rates later this year. Keep on moving the goalposts. Keep on moving the goalposts. We're going to take that football away and keep on moving the goalposts. Who's the kicker for the Ravens, right? They're going to need that guy to kick this field goal in the future because they keep on moving, as I said, and they're running out of time with the election. Furthermore, he said that 3 interest rate cuts in 2024 is reasonable for Fed officials to debate. That's not saying that we want to do, we should debate it. That's a much different, and data will drive when the Fed will cut rates. But of course, you have heard a little bit of chatter in the not most recently future or past, I should say, that a couple of people are like, is it even possible that the Fed might raise rates? Yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. Let's see who's saying hello to this morning. Hey, Sharon, how are you? Good morning and great. Yeah, well, you know what? I had all this like pent up energy. I was just fired up. So thank you so much for saying hello this morning. It was a long ride out to the Great White North, Maine. Did that up and back in one day. All right, let's bring up CNBC. They should be coming. We'll go simulcast with them, and they should be dropping their very exciting data in just a minute. Again, we have PCE coming out this morning, and we'll go over it for you here. Initial jobless claims. And the PCE, if you're not aware, is kind of one of the Fed's favorite inflation numbers. And PCE core is targeted at 2.8. 2.8, that is the consensus. Previous was 2.9, if I understand this chart. I think that's how it works. Yeah. So we're especially looking at the core PCE 2.8 and the regular PCE at 2.4. Let's go to CNBC. They should be breaking this news right now. No. Okay. This timing is not working out. Just hang with me. They'll be back. They'll be there in a second. Let's see if we have any other. No, we don't have any other. I'm just waiting for them to come out. Where is their video? Come on, Becky, quick. And we're oh, here we go now. Okay. There she is. She was a little late.
Are just a few seconds away from some new PCE inflation data, personal income and spending numbers, and initial jobless claims. It's the PCE number that's the biggie, though. That's the one the market's waiting for because that's the one the Fed watches so closely. Ahead of that, we've been watching the futures, and the Dow has been in the red all morning long, along with the other major averages. Dow right now down by 140, NASDAQ off by 44, the S&P off by 14. Rick Santelli is standing by at the CME in Chicago. Rick, take it away.
Rick Santelli.
Yes, well, jobless claims, 215,000, higher than expected. 215,000 is the loftiest level going back to the beginning of February. On continuing claims, 1,905,000, and we finally crossed over 1.9 million. That's the highest read since the third week in November. Now the money numbers, personal income for January, up 1%, up 1%. And you know what's fascinating here? Last January, guess what? We started out up 1%. And last January, that was the highest level going all the way back to July of 21. So we're equaling January. This number, once again, could take you back to July of 21. That is a whopper of a spending jump, or income jump, excuse me. On spending, up 0.2, exactly as expected. Real spending goes negative when adjusted for inflation. That's down 0.1%, and down 0.1% equals what we had in August of last year. To find a lower number, you have to go to March of 2023. Now, let's get into it. The deflator, personal consumption deflator, month over month, up 0.3%, exactly as expected. In the rearview mirror, 0.2 becomes 0.1. Now, on the 310 side, that's the highest level since September of last year, something to pay attention to. Now, let's go back to the deflator, but this time the core, okay? And let's go, let's go year over year on the deflator, and that's going to be up 2.4%, exactly as expected. 2.6 in the rearview mirror, so making very good progress. This is the lowest level since February of 21. Now, month over month, core deflator up 0.4%, exactly as expected. And 0.4%, though, follows up 0.1%. So up 0.4% is the warmest number, going all the way back to January of last year. If you round it to half, if you round it to 0.36 up to 4%, that would be February of last year, because we take these things out a couple of digits. And finally, year over year core deflator, in my opinion, one of the more important numbers, 2.8 last, what we expected, 2.9 last time. So we've made progress. Now, here's something interesting. This is my favorite calculation. This is now the 12th consecutive month that this has moved lower than the previous month, and that is indeed a very good thing, of course. Now, 2.8% is good, but consider this. Pre-COVID in March of 2020, this was 1.5%, just to give some context. Now, what have yields done? They've dropped.
All right, so cutting back from that, what you heard is that core PCE was 2.8. Last month, it was 2.9. People are going to say that is progress. And what will happen today, most likely, is that bond yields will go down. And probably at the end of the day, mortgage rates will probably come off their 7.15 number and be down from. So this is probably good for mortgage rates on the day. If you want to lock in later date, might be a good idea. Although, I'm not your financial advisor or your lawyer, because I'm neither. But it seems today, at least, there's some indication that inflation is cooling, notwithstanding the fact that the prior CPI numbers and the producer numbers that we saw, inflation was up. So today, we're actually looking at some cooling or slightly cooling numbers. Now, 2.8% is still significantly higher than the Fed 2% goal. And I think we're going to start to hear some creep that they didn't want actually 2%, that they wanted it in the 2% range, right? They're going to try to declare victory fairly soon, I think, because up against the election, they're just not in the position to raise or to cut rates that many times in 2024. So let's just go back to Becky really quick.
Was in negative territory. Now it's up by 50. The S&P futures now up by 5. Joe Lavorgna is here, SMBC Nikko Securities, U.S. chief economist, and of course, former White House National Economic Council chief economist. Ben Harris, Brookings Economics Policy Director and former Assistant Secretary for Economic Policy at the Treasury Department, and our very own senior economics reporter, Steve Leisman. Steve, let's go to you first. Dig through what you think some of the most important things are here.
Real quickly on the PCE number, you have this still goods deflation. Goods were down 0.2, services up 0.6. And so this contradiction in the economy still goes on. You did have a surge in food prices up 0.5%. I think we do need to give a tip to economists who seem to do at least one thing well, which is their ability to take the CPI number and the PPI number and translate that into a very good forecast for the PCE. So they seem to have nailed that. I was always more interested going into this number because I thought that the market had probably already knew what this number was or had a good forecast for it, probably priced it in. The income and spending numbers, it's very interesting to me that income was up 1% and spending was up only 0.2%. Savings rate was up just a little bit, But it was an interesting time where maybe you could tell a story here that consumers seem to have decided to take a break, replenish their savings a little bit. They seem to have had a pretty robust holiday spending season. And so January was a pause. And I guess the question becomes for the market, is it a pause that refreshes or a pause that is the leading edge of perhaps slower consumer spending? Can't know that, but it is interesting. Income's very healthy. I'll look into the sources of that income in just a second here. But the spending was much more muted, and that went along with our CNBC.
Look at that 10-year now down to 2.95. It's definitely off the 4.3 handle. I think if we ever get to 4.4, it's going to be off to the races if we get to 4.4.
Steve's right, and Rick's right to point out that's very strong income number that came up 1%. Yeah. Is that good news to you? Shows that things are happening, or is it a sign of concern for potential?
I still think it's concern because the income number is based largely on the payroll data. The payroll data were strong, and I've got real problems with the payroll data. Number one, the tax receipt numbers suggest the net birth death adjustments that they use to inflate the numbers are overstated. Number two, if we look at small businesses, their hiring plans, there is now a major gap between the net birth adjustments that the BLS is assuming, which, by the way, accounted for almost 60% of last year's job growth. There's this big gap. If that's the case, Becky, you will see income over time be revised down. It's a much different picture. On March 28th, we get the revision to, or the data on the gross domestic income for the fourth quarter. That number has been significantly weaker than GDP. And in July, we'll get the annual benchmark revision. My guess is as we get to March and then into July, we're going to find an economy that is a lot weaker than people think. And I would argue this is very consistent with consumer sentiment, which, while it is up sharply from its low, is still consistent with recession.
Ben, you have any thoughts on?
Wow, that was an amazing statement. And also, when you look at a couple of things with the jobs report that came out just a little while ago, when you look at that jobs report and the GDP number factors government spending. And when you really dive into this jobs report, it says that the private economy, where actual value is added, value is not added by the government, value is added by the private sector. When you look at the private sector, it is struggling. What is really growing is the government sector, basically outpacing private and the jobs that are being created are more like DoorDash jobs than a normal 40-hour job at a company where you get benefits and all that other good stuff.
The U.S. consumer, my take is the U.S. consumer will likely continue the robust spending that we've seen over the past couple of years.
Okay, so you and Joe don't agree on this. You don't think that you're going to see some sort of turn when the revisions come?
I mean, look, I agree with the blue chip forecast where we're looking at around 2% growth for Q1. Atlanta Fed now is slightly higher, around 3%. Until you show me consistent patterns of U.S. consumers slowing down, I'm just going to look to the recent historical trends.
Steve, what do you think just about the strength of the consumer right now?
I kind of agree that I wouldn't jump off of this number and say now is the time to sort of give up the idea that the consumer is going to remain strong here. Always listen to Joe Livornia and his outlook there. If indeed employment is weaker than we believe, then that's a reason to be concerned. I will point out, and I wonder what Joe thinks of this, I have wages up a very healthy 0.4% in this report here, which to me has been the thing that many economists have, I think, overlooked, in the idea that people have thought all of the spending came from that stimulus that was out there. I tended to think that at least a good chunk of it has come from the idea that wages have been decent and employment has been relatively strong. So long as that remains, I would be upbeat on the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the real wage side, it's only been very recently that the wages have turned positive, and there's been tremendous government support programs that have helped basically stabilize income. The problem, as you know, Steve, with all of this is that income and consumption are measures of current activity. They don't tell us where we're going. So the claims numbers and the continuing claims, staffing plans, temp employment, those tend to be leading indicators, the factory work week. All those metrics have basically been in a sharp downtrend. Now, we've not seen a pullback in broader activity as measured by GDP. However, if the labor market isn't as healthy as we think, and over time we realize that, what that means is the longer,
which I think the jobs report showed,
we have an inverted yield curve, the longer that bank lending standards are tightening, the more at risk we are of a pullback in spending and a downturn in the economy. So even though we might appear to
man, if I listen to this guy here, if I had a house in Southwest Florida that I was thinking about selling, I'd get on that. If I got an offer on my house right now, I'd sell that puppy because based upon that, there's always this tipping point, right? When it's just like when the emperor has no clothes. The first guy that says, "Hey, yo, emperor, you have no clothes," what happens to them? Boom, head cut off, right? There's always this tipping point where eventually everyone figures it out. And nobody wants to call that because it's bad news. But that guy there, he's pretty much a doomer. And I'm a mild skeptic right now because I don't want the rate cuts, because if we're going to have a lot of rate cuts, that means the economy is slowed down, right? Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You got to be careful what you wish for. But you don't want these higher interest rates, do you, either? So, yeah, it's a tricky thing. It's careful what you wish for. On the other hand, when you look at the mortgage rates for, let's just say, a 50-year window, and you say it's 7.1% for a mortgage rate, historically, that is kind of in the middle, so to speak. I remember when I bought this house in 2002, and I got a mortgage rate in the 5s, and I was like, oh my God, that is a great deal. Because historically, over the 50-year window, it was a great deal. And so while mortgage rates are 7.1 and are a shocker for most people, especially buyers in the 25 to 40-year age bracket, from a historic point of view, 7.1 is not out of the norm. In fact, it is the norm when you look at the big picture. All right. Hey, listen, I really enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll put the link to that video I put up in Maine somewhere in the description. I'll add that. Until then, I'll see you next time. Go make some money. Have a great day. Bye-bye.